Aaliyah had always loved eating out. To her, the variety of meals, the convenience, and the chance to explore new places in her small southern town outweighed the inconvenience of cooking at home. That evening, after a long day at the community center where she worked, she found herself in a sleek new restaurant that had just opened on the outskirts of town. The place had captivated her with its modern rustic decor and ever-buzzing crowd. After finishing a plate of her favorite fried catfish and okra, Aaliyah felt her stomach churn, not out of sickness, but from the urgent need to visit the restroom. Leaving her empty plate behind, she got up and asked a nearby waitress where the restroom was. The waitress, smiling politely, pointed her toward a narrow hallway. However, upon reaching the restroom, Aaliyah quickly realized it was occupied. She knocked a few times but got no response other than muffled noises from within. Her stomach twisted tighter. She couldn't wait much longer and looked around, desperate for an alternative. Her eyes drifted across the bustling restaurant, eventually landing on a door swinging slightly open. A small, worn-out sign above the doorway read "Kitchen" in faded letters. For a moment, her thoughts raced. Should I take a look? The idea crept into her mind gently at first, but then she forcefully pushed it aside. No, don't be ridiculous, Aaliyah. Just wait for the restroom. She shifted uncomfortably, her stomach tightening yet again. Her gaze, however, remained glued to the swinging door. She started hearing the faint sound of clattering dishes and muffled voices from the kitchen. The sound was more chaotic than she imagined a kitchen in such a prestigious and exotic restaurant would have. Stop staring, she scolded herself silently. Maybe it's better not to know. Just as she took a step back, a startling movement caught her attention. Two rats, thin, gray, and bold, ran out of a small hole near a box on the ground. They squeaked noisily as they chased each other in circles before disappearing back into the kitchen through the partially open door. Aaliyah recoiled, her brows furrowing in disbelief. Rats? Here? That food, the food I just ate. The thought stopped her cold as her mind filled with images she didn't want to entertain. Questions pelted her like raindrops. Was my meal really prepared in that kitchen? Could it be as bad as I'm imagining right now? How could this restaurant, so beautiful and stylish, possibly have rats? The rational voice in her head advised her to leave it alone. Don't ruin your evening with unnecessary drama, Aaliyah. Just wait for the restroom, finish up, and go home. But her curiosity bloomed like wildfire, fed by thoughts she couldn't suppress. What if there was something truly wrong? What if it was more than just rats? Before she could stop herself, Aaliyah stepped closer to the kitchen door, her heart beating fast as she carefully pushed it open with her fingertips. It swung inward without resistance, revealing the scene on the other side. What she saw made her stomach churn violently. It stopped her in her tracks and nearly made her vomit, her mouth falling slightly open in shock. It was worse than anything she had prepared herself for. The kitchen, if one could even call it that, was a nightmare, a rotten pit of death and mess. The odor emanating from the room was like that of rotten meat and mold. Piles of dirty dishes leaned precariously on both sides of the sink, some with food remnants so old that they had hardened into an unrecognizable brown crust, with green, mucus-like mold growing undisturbed for what seemed like weeks. Aaliyah's eyes scanned the room as if in slow motion. Everything her eyes captured was worse than the last. The kitchen counters, places that were supposed to be for food preparation, were packed with unwashed cutting boards and knives caked in residue and left exposed to houseflies. Their continuous buzzing created a grotesque soundtrack to the chaos. Then Aaliyah saw the kitchen staff, and her dread sank deeper. The women walking through the kitchen looked unkempt, their hair messy with dandruff visibly clinging to their dirty hair ties. Their faces were covered with sweat, and their aprons, once white she assumed, were stained beyond belief with smears of sauce, grease, and who knows what else, like they hadn't been washed in years. It was then that her eyes landed on what could only be the head cook. The woman was a large, middle-aged figure with deep lines of wrinkles on her face. She stood over a boiling pot of soup, unconcerned about the sweat dripping down her neck or the stained, sleeveless dress she wore. But it was what she did next that made Aaliyah's jaw drop. When she stopped stirring the soup for a moment, the cook absent-mindedly scratched her unshaved, sweaty armpit, her bare armpit, with the very spoon she had been using to stir the soup. Before Aaliyah could even realize it, the woman slipped the spoon back into the pot and continued stirring like nothing had happened. A wave of disgust roared over Aaliyah and she clamped a hand over her mouth to prevent herself from vomiting. The oozing smell in the room, a mix of rotten food, sweat, and wet rags, didn't help. Rats ran freely between the boxes piled across the dirty floor. She could hardly believe this was the same place serving such delicious meals to customers. Her brain screamed at her to look away, to walk back out into the dining area and pretend she hadn't seen any of this. But her feet were glued to the spot, as if the scene was too ugly to turn away from. She only snapped out of her trance when she felt something soft and wet beneath her shoe. Looking down, she realized she had stepped on lettuce that was floating lazily in a film of dirty water on the floor. That was her breaking point. Heart pounding, she stumbled back out into the dining area, trying her best to look normal, clutching her stomach with one hand and covering her mouth with the other. Aaliyah fled toward her table, grabbed her bag, and moved quickly toward the exit, ignoring the smiles of the waiters as she passed by. It wasn't until she had made it outside, where the cool evening breeze kissed her sweaty skin, that she finally lost control. Bending over the gutter by the side of the road, Aaliyah emptied the contents of her stomach, vomiting violently, expelling the meal she had just enjoyed minutes ago. As her mind replayed the horrors she had just witnessed, tears streamed down her cheeks as she struggled to catch her breath. The memory of the sweating cook and that filthy spoon wouldn't leave her, no matter how hard she tried to shove it away. As she wiped her mouth and stood upright again, a wave of regret and anger washed over her. How could I, someone who thinks she's paying so much to eat good food, have been so blind? She had trusted the fad of polished tables, beautiful decor, and an impressive wine list without questioning what went on behind the scenes. And now she knew the truth. Aaliyah wrapped her arms around herself as she began walking home, her steps slow and heavy. The irony was suffocating. The very convenience she treasured, the comfort of eating out, had betrayed her in the worst way. She thought back to every meal she had eaten here and at countless other restaurants before this. She shuddered. Aaliyah had always been a fan of eating out. But perhaps this experience was the wake-up call she needed. As she made her way home in the quiet dark, her mind drifted, not just to the horror she had seen tonight, but to the many times food had filled the gap where love and comfort should have been. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Her thoughts spiraled back, reaching deeper into her past, to moments she had long buried. Aaliyah, the eldest of three, understood why her parents worked hard. But she yearned for something more, something she didn't know how to ask for. Homemade meals. Togetherness. Warmth that wasn't packaged in styrofoam or served through a takeout window. She remembered the first time she tried to cook. It was a Saturday morning, and her parents had already left for work. Her father drove trucks cross-country, often gone for weeks at a time. Her mother ran a small beauty supply shop in the town square, a local fixture with customers who lined up before dawn. That morning, Aaliyah decided she'd surprise her siblings, Jamal and Nia, with breakfast. She tried to make rice and scrambled eggs. But the rice burned. The acrid smell filled the kitchen, clinging to the curtains and their clothes. Her siblings' faces fell as they looked at the charred mess. Aaliyah felt the sting of failure bloom in her chest. It wasn't just about food, it was about what it represented. She'd tried to give them something whole, something warm, and she had failed. Despite more attempts, her cooking endeavors often ended in disaster. Jamal once got food poisoning from her undercooked chicken. Nia cried when the pancakes came out bitter and rubbery. Eventually, her mother, tired and overworked, started leaving cash on the counter instead. "Just get y'all something from down the road," she'd say in a hurry. At first, it was thrilling. The freedom to choose their own meals, the joy of visiting Mr. Benny's grill stand or the corner store for snack packs. But with time, the novelty wore thin. They began to crave real meals, meals that filled not just their stomachs, but something deeper. One evening, the trio set out to find dinner. Aaliyah led the way with a determined sparkle in her eye. Let's find something good tonight, she said, ignoring the tight squeeze of coins in her fist. The streets buzzed with life, gospel music from a church down the road, the scent of fried green tomatoes from an old lady's porch stand, and the ever-familiar sizzle of hot grease from the food stalls near the community lot. They passed a man grilling ribs on a converted oil drum. The smell was intoxicating. That's it, Jamal said. Let's get ribs. But they didn't have enough. Eventually, they landed at a small corner vendor selling kebab-style skewers. Suya, the man called it. He'd moved from Atlanta and brought his mother's recipe with him. The meat looked juicy and glistened in the light. How much for one? Aaliyah asked. One skewer, $2, he replied. They pulled their change and managed to get 2 sticks. But the first bite sent a chill down Aaliyah's spine. The meat was slimy, sour, with a taste that lingered unpleasantly. Nia grimaced. Is it bad? It's spoiled, Jamal whispered, his eyes wide. Aaliyah's heart sank. But she forced herself to chew. Just eat it, she said firmly. We can't waste the money. She watched as her siblings reluctantly obeyed. Each bite was a small betrayal. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the meat on the ground and march back to the vendor. But she didn't. Because hunger was louder than pride. And shame was heavier than anger. When she left for university in Jackson, Mississippi, Aaliyah carried that shame with her. Cooking was a foreign language she never mastered. So she stayed in her comfort zone, takeout, food trucks, late-night diners. During her service year with AmeriCorps, she was assigned housing with a roommate named Renee. Renee was sunshine. Her laugh filled every room, and her kitchen smelled like garlic, sage, and something soulful. Aaliyah watched with quiet envy as Renee kneaded dough, simmered stews, and roasted vegetables. You ever cook? Renee asked one night, catching Aaliyah watching. Aaliyah chuckled. Not really my thing. You should learn. It's cheaper, and you know what's going in your food. Plus, it's kinda like therapy. Aaliyah smiled and nodded, but the wall stayed up. Her pride wouldn't let her admit she was afraid. Afraid of failing again. Afraid of those old memories resurfacing. She continued her life, thriving on Yelp reviews and foodie Instagram pages. Friends often joked that she had a gift for sniffing out the best joints in town. She wore it like a badge. Then she met Elijah. Tall, charming, with a quiet confidence that drew her in. He loved music, old records, and slow dancing in the living room. He also loved home-cooked meals. One evening, after a date, they returned to her place. As they settled in, Elijah stretched and rubbed his stomach. You know, I wouldn't mind a little something to eat. You cook? Aaliyah froze. Her throat tightened. We could just order something, she offered, trying to play it cool. He smiled. Come on, just something simple. Eggs and toast? I don't cook, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Elijah's smile faded. He nodded slowly, stood, and grabbed his jacket. I'll see you later, Aaliyah. He left without another word. Renee found Aaliyah lying motionless on the couch that night. You good? She asked. Just tired, Aaliyah replied, burying the shame deep. Life moved on. Aaliyah returned to her rhythm, ordering from restaurants, scrolling through delivery apps. One Friday, she ordered from a trendy new spot in town. As she ate her pasta at her work desk, something odd caught her eye. A fly. Not just any fly, a toilet fly, the kind found near drains and filth. It was cooked into the sauce. She gagged. She told herself it was a one-time thing. A mistake. But then came the stomach aches. The fevers. The night sweats. She ended up in the hospital. Salmonella. The doctor's words were firm, you need to start thinking about what you're eating. Fancy doesn't mean clean. The bacteria that cause this don't care about how good a place looks on the outside. Aaliyah nodded but didn't listen. Until that day. That restaurant. That kitchen. The rats. The stench. The cook with the spoon. That was the breaking point. That night, Aaliyah made a decision. For real this time. She asked Renee for help. They cleaned out her dusty kitchen. They bought pots, pans, spices. They watched cooking tutorials. Burned the first few meals. Laughed. Tried again. The first meal she made on her own was a simple stir-fry. It didn't look like much, but the flavor was clean, bright. Hers. She wept over the plate, alone, but not lonely. Over time, cooking became joy. Renee and Aaliyah became sisters in the kitchen, experimenting, failing, celebrating. Aaliyah found herself talking to food. Whispering gratitude as onions sizzled in olive oil. One evening, Elijah came back. Humbled, apologetic. I was wrong, he said. I judged you unfairly. She invited him in. Served him a warm bowl of her homemade gumbo. He cried. From that day forward, Aaliyah balanced her love for eating out with the joy of making her own meals. She still explored food trucks, but with fresh eyes. She asked questions. Looked deeper. Because now, she knew the truth. Food wasn't just about taste. It was about care, intention, and health. And for the first time in her life, Aaliyah felt full.